Good morning, everyone. I'm Martina Jordan, Professional Officer for BASWA Northern Ireland, and you're all very welcome to our webinar this morning from wherever you are in the world. Dia Dave agus Céad Míle Fáilte Romhaibh. This webinar is the first webinar as part of the BASWA's World Social Work Month, and what a way to begin this month of celebrating social work with our colleagues from around the world. I'm particularly interested in global social work because I had the privilege of working with social workers, alongside social workers in various parts of Europe and in the Philippines, which is where I met my lovely friend Maricris. And the learning I acquired personally and professionally through these experiences is something invaluable. And it's something that has strengthened my sense of identity as a social worker and my sense of pride as a social worker also. And so that you too can learn from the experiences of colleagues from around the world, we're very grateful to have with us this morning 4 wonderful social workers. From New Zealand, we have Maggie. From Oman, we have Sophia. From Jordan, we have Ashraf. And from the Philippines, we have Maricris. So you are all very, very welcome here this morning. So the running order of today is that our speakers will provide you with an overview of the role of social work in their respective countries. I will make perhaps a brief reflection on what we've just heard. And then later on, we will be asking social workers, our panelists, maybe questions or to share their reflections from what maybe they've heard from each other, and any reflections that the delegates have on what they've heard also. So the way we work via this webinar is that on the top right-hand corner of your screen, you will see an orange box with a white arrow. So please feel free to use the chat function and put in any questions or comments or reflections you would like to make in that box. And we will field those later on. And our country director, Carolyn Ewart, will be inviting the panelists to respond to those. So as this webinar goes ahead, please do use the chat and questions box. Okay, so without further ado, I don't think there's anything else I have to ask. Yeah, just for your information, this webinar is being recorded. So if you know of other BASWA members who have been unable to be here this morning, who would benefit from seeing this webinar, it will be available later on the BASWA website. Okay, so without further ado, I'd like to invite the lovely Maggie to begin our presentations this morning. All right, Maggie.
Kia ora koutou katoa. That's hello from where I come from in New Zealand. Lovely to be with you and sharing from around the world. So I'm just going to open up by showing you a picture of what I guess summarise social work as being a lighthouse when people are a bit lost. And this lighthouse is at the tip of New Zealand, in the northern tip. And I was there just 2 weeks ago visiting that. It's quite a hike to that end of the country. But anyway, I guess I feel like social work can be depicted in one of its forms as a lighthouse. So that's my story for today. So the next slide, please. So I guess you might ask, where on earth in the world is New Zealand? And I thought I'd give you a little context. We are a long way from everywhere, really. You can see the distances when you're flying. So it's a long haul to get across the world to New Zealand. We're right at the tip of the world, and distance is quite a problem for us economically. It's quite a distance for our goods to travel. But New Zealand has a population of 5 million, And the country is about a bit bigger than the United Kingdom, who have a 65.8 million population. So we're very underpopulated compared to Britain, and we're far away. So it kind of makes us a bit of a different nation. We're an island nation, so we have quite a changeable weather set of circumstances. And also it means that we're quite vulnerable to climate change and to climate incidences, and we're on a volcanic fault line. So they're just some of the geographical matters for us. So next slide, please. And to talk a little bit about the establishment of our country, although it wasn't at the very beginning, but New Zealand operates with a treaty that was negotiated with the Indigenous people of New Zealand, who are called Māori. And the intention of that treaty is called the words the Tiriti or Waitangi, which is a Māori word for talking about the way in which the Crown and the Indigenous people undertook to work together in partnership. One was not to dominate the other. But as often happened, there was definite domination and a raft of breaches of that treaty by the Crown. At the time when it was signed, Māori were the dominant culture and they had the largest numbers, and so they didn't particularly imagine themselves being overrun. They're now around about 16% of the population, and so they were very quickly overrun, and it was actually a deliberate colonisation policy to basically decimate them and to be rid of them. So quite extensive levels of damage caused by colonisation. And it's left an indelible negative legacy in the people. And so it's a really large underpinning of our society. There's a loss of culture, of language and a sense of self. And so tangata whenua, so the Indigenous people, Māori people, regularly feature in health and well-being negative statistics. So social work has been bedded onto coming back to the treaty and recommitting to that and working in partnership. And so there's a lot of commitment and effort for social work in New Zealand to be strongly influenced by expectations of our Indigenous people. So it's a long, slow process. There's been, many, many years of protest and effort to change, but in my lifetime, I'm seeing quite rapid change. The use of the native language was very much kind of, put aside and not interested. And now it's seen as a bit of a badge of honour, which is a terrific change in my children's lifetime and as a country. And you'll hear our Prime Minister use Māori language quite often. And so there's just a real resurgence of that culture being recognised as the original culture. And it very much influences social work. So social work training would cover a lot of thinking about the Indigenous people's ways, and there's an expectation that you at least have basic concepts. So people who come to work internationally will often find that quite a challenge to grapple with, but they're expected to grapple with it. So part of Māori culture was also led to a change of things being very governed by the statutory agencies for social work to a devolution to community service and the NGOs offering a lot of the services. And that was because Māori in particular said, you've made an absolute mess of things for us and our people are, having a treacherous time. You are not really the best people to help us when we get into trouble. And so we want our own models. And so that led to the government changing from being in control of all of the social work offer to seeking community involvement. There always had been like church involvement, but now it's much more likely in New Zealand that if you get help from a service, it will be from an NGO. And so the breadth of social work that's offered is everything from the statutory, which is only when there's powers required to uplift children for safety or other such interventions. Generally, the kind of help to recover or to repair or to restore or to heal will come from an NGO that will provide that service. And health provides some social work as well, health related. So think I've covered all the notes in there. So the next slide, please. Where I think about the qualifications, and it's only just very recently this year actually that compulsory registration has come in for social work. We've had a very mixed bag of the way in which people get qualified to do social work, and there's generally been some, you know, 2 or 3, well, 1, 2 and 3 year courses that have been acceptable, and as time's gone on, it's become longer and longer. It's now a 4-year degree, like any other degree, and that's required to go on to get a registration process. And so as of just February this year, it's now compulsory for people, if they call themselves a social worker, to be registered. So the recognised qualification of a 4-year degree is what anybody who is going into it would do, but there's a lot of people, say, of my age who haven't done it, and we would get recognition for the qualification that we did do, plus our years of service, if we can pass a test of that. And so we can be registered with training and with experience, practice experience. So we've still got quite a mixed workforce, and there's a shortage. There's insufficient workforce, particularly in the NGO sector, and that's mostly because the NGO sector is not well enough resourced by government, and so the salaries are lower. Government contracts for NGOs, our own organisation would have contracts with governments to provide our services, and they set standards. So there's quite a lot of control about the way in which you do your work, but you could actually just be a group who saw a need, set up a service and started providing for that need, and you might well fundraise through charity and be not controlled by government, you know, methods, but you would, if you wanted to be a charity, they have expectations for you to have accountabilities and things. So it's less easy for you to just be a sole ranger kind of set up your own thing and do it your own way. You've got to follow a set of guidelines basically to provide services. So it's not kind of like the Wild West. So the areas of social work involved such a raft of practices, all ages, all ethnicities, all genders, all issues, for example, family violence, sexual violence, alcohol and other drugs, mental health. They can be recovery and remedial, or they can be developmental. So it might be that you're trying to grow skills in someone. So all of the above. So next slide, please. I thought I'd just describe the particular service that I manage. I am a registered social worker, and I've been managing this service for 27 or so years. We're a small local service and have specialised in working in the area of sexual violence recovery, and we work with children, youth and adults. We have a multidisciplinary team, social workers, psychologists, no psychiatrists, counsellors, psychotherapists, a whole mixture. Our main piece of work is the therapy, recovery therapy, but we also do preventative education in the community. We also do advocacy, and we work on quite a lot of national advisories, and we do some crisis service work as well. So that's the range, and we see all ages, all ethnicities, all genders. We operate in the community from a residential home, and that's quite common for NGOs to just be operating out of a residence. It suits us well. Nobody sleeps there, no one lives there. It's just a nice place to offer services for children. We have a big backyard for the kids to play in. So that's how we operate our service. We have contracts with government for a couple of pieces of work, but we also fundraise. So the service was set up 33 years ago by 3 women who saw a gap for help for children who disclose sexual abuse. That's what we were set up to do. The next slide, please. One of the things about New Zealand, and it's really birthed out of our Indigenous culture, is that we work collaboratively a lot. And in our city in particular, we work a lot more even than other cities in New Zealand, but a lot of the services will operate in collaborations. So they might be local collaborations, they might be national collaborations, and anything in between. And they can be around issues, They can be around age groups, they can be around populations, they can be about geography. So all sorts of collaborative projects go on, and our organisation, even as a small organisation, is involved in lots of those. We're involved in the sexual violence sector locally and nationally. We're involved in a wider family violence sector collaboration that includes sexual violence. There's a lot of collaborations around the post-earthquake work that I'll talk about in a minute. There's lots of collaborations around national bodies for NGOs and doing social services. So lots of ways in which we work together. And it's been pivotal actually to the other things we've had to do, which is my next slide, about some very serious calamities that have befallen New Zealand and in particular my city. We've randomly suffered more than our share. So the next slide, it will show a picture of a serious incident in my city. Well, in our region, we had a major earthquake here, 10-year anniversary just a week or so ago, and 80% of our CBD was needed to be demolished. A lot of the wider area was harmed. 185 lives lost, one of them my brother-in-law, lots of injuries, and we've basically had to start, you know, a lot of the city from scratch. Quite a lot of the homes in the regions, you know, they were okay, and in the suburbs, but the city itself. And so it's been a long haul and very traumatic. And people think of an earthquake as a single incident, but last time I saw the numbers, I stopped counting, it's about 16,000, of which there was about 12,000 quite soon after. You have a lot of aftershocks. So you can imagine the trauma of that. When we have a traumatic incident in our life, it's often a single thing that happens and then you start to recover. But when you're continually re-exposed, like a war zone, it's difficult to recover. So we learned a lot in the process of that. In particular, working together. You just couldn't have done the recovery without working together in these big collaborations. And there was lots of amazing stories following that calamity. So if I go on to the next slide, it shows a picture of another disaster that befell our city not even 18 months ago, but something that we would never have thought we'd see here in New Zealand. And in fact, that's what the shooter said, because we would least expect it. But we had 51 people killed, gunned down in 2 mosques in our city. A very, very shocking experience for everybody. And yeah, anyway, a very big story to tell. But once again, the things that we learnt about in the earthquake so came to play in how to respond to that situation, and pulling together, pulling our resources, wrapping around, getting the community themselves to lead what they wanted, what they needed. They could tell us, we could get beside them and work as best as they wanted. A remarkable time in our lives. And so then the next slide I have is the present disaster that we find ourselves and yourselves, everybody's in, and that's the COVID situation. And I do feel like a bit of a fraud talking about it from New Zealand's point of view, because we've had a surprisingly light dusting of that problem. We've only had a complete lockdown of our country at this time last year for 4 weeks. Most of the rest of the time we have not been locked down. We have, on Saturday night, our major city in Auckland went into a level 3 lockdown, which is quite a strong, there's a scale of 4. So level 3 is quite a high lockdown because there was a little pop of some community cases, but we will go into a lockdown over about 1 to 2 community cases. So it's quite a strong, quick response. One expects that in a week or so we'll stop being locked down, but it's, you know, not easy, but a lot of the time we're living a very normal life. And the slide I've put up there, I guess, tells a big story for us. This is our Director General of Health as the male and the woman as our Prime Minister. And you'll see they do stand-up communications every day when we were locked down, and they do them frequently whenever there's a flare-up. And you can see that the politician is listening to the scientists. So the science and the specialists have led the response. And so that's, everybody loves our scientists because they've become, you know, familiar to us, and they've given us really good information. But everyone loves the Prime Minister for her level of communication as well. So we've felt well informed. And once again, that whole, the concept used is a team of 5 million. So we're all in this, you know, if we work together, we can solve this. And so that's been the kind of ethos of working collectively, working collaboratively. And so my final slide to wrap up is just to show you that this is part of my city that was decimated, and the recovery, and it's our city rebuilding itself, and none of that was there. It's fairly recently opened, but we're back to having, you know, some lively hive of activity in our CBD as we kind of get back on our feet. We've got a long way to go. There's lots of empty sections and big blocks of rubble and all of that to go, but a lot has been rebuilt. And so we've just celebrated 10 years of, you know, keeping on going. But we have a tired population. Anyway, I'm sure that's way more than 10 minutes, so I'm going to stop chatting, and I'm sure there'll be questions perhaps later I can answer. That's me.
Thank you very much, Maggie. That was, it was quite surprising. Well, you know, I'm a little bit biased. Excuse me, but anyway, because I'm mad about New Zealand because of my experience in restorative justice. A number of things jumped out there, Maggie, in what you were saying. I mean, obviously the Crown and the, not Crown, but well, I suppose conflict between the Crown and the Indigenous population and how that's been managed. What really surprised me, and I imagine this will come up in the questions box, is that the majority of social work services are delivered by NGOs. And I think that's a very powerful, well, you know, well, that's what I'm hearing. And that the statutory services come in when, you know, they have to, but it is led mostly by NGOs. So therefore, social work services are organic and community based, and yeah, which is I think obviously I think that's a very strong sort of approach. And I know people will be commenting on that, given how we do things here in the UK. What I also loved, and I suppose it speaks to just your history and the history of the Indigenous population, is the community collaboration and yeah, communication. You spoke there at the end about the science, your director of, the medical director, what I don't know his title, but just that sense that everything is done together. You do it together, you collaborate. Again, that's what speaks to me as perfect social work, and things are done with people rather than to them or for them. So again, would you like to respond to anything I've said just there now, Maggie, or would you like to wait until more questions come in?
I don't want to dominate the time. I'll just reflect that it was a surprise to me when I realised that we were different about that statutory NGO thing, because it's been that way for so long. But more and more of the statutory duties have been devolved and delegated out to the NGOs over probably the last 10 years. And the downside is that the government hasn't necessarily devolved the resources. They've devolved a lot of the work, but they've tightened up the piece of work that they do. There's definite pluses about that, but we're just not quite on an even playing field with the resources. But we're improving things.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I heard that as well, and I think probably other countries experience a similar issue. And in terms of workforce and other resources needed to sustain any kind of organisation or project. Okay, and the other thing is it's sort of resonated with me. Well, I kind of more interested to hear later on, hopefully, about the fact that registration has only happened this year. So yeah, because obviously certainly in Northern Ireland, you know, we've had to register with our regulatory body for many years. So I think that's something also that maybe someone in the audience might like to ask you more about later on. Okay.
I'll just say quickly that one of the reasons why they didn't make it regulated earlier is because the statutory agency didn't have enough qualified social workers themselves. So we've got a workforce issue there, and so they spent many years getting enough people able to be registered before they made it the law.
Absolutely, and you're bringing me back to the social work qualification as well, which again is something else that's very interesting. And again, we would perhaps go back to that later, Maggie. Thank you. Okay, well, thanks, Maggie. I'm now going to move on to Sophia. Can you hear me, Sophia? Hello, Sophia. This is the beauty of doing an international webinar. Hello.
Hello, how are you? How is everything?
Hello, you're very welcome, Sophia.
Yes. Well,
Would you like to introduce yourself and then tell us about social work in Oman?
yes. First, I want to thank you for to let me share my experience in Oman with you, and I am proud of to be one of your speakers today. I am glad, happy also to be with you. I am Safiya Hamoud Ali Al Aisari. I am social worker from Sultanate of Oman. I live in Muscat actually, but today I have 5 days. I went to Salala. It's more than 1,000 kilo from Muscat. Okay, just for 5 days. So now I'm talking from Salala. I'm working as a social worker in the family protection department as the head of the shelter. Our shelter called Dar Al Wifaq. Okay, here in Oman, the social worker in Oman, they are supposed to be to have this job as a social worker. They're supposed to be graduated as a psychology or social worker, has a bachelor degree, and also they can work in ministries or schools, hospitals, and also they have sometimes they are working in Department of Social Welfare, in military, and sometimes they are working in companies in the department, especially for social responsibility. And also they are working in NGOs sometimes. And about my job, I'm working in a shelter. This shelter is only one in Oman, the first one and only one. And was opening from just 2013. The shelter is working with the cases of children, children abuse, women abuse. I'm working with the human trafficking cases, and our job is our duty in our job. It is 24/7. So all the time we are receiving cases. We are contacting with the different field. We are contacting with family, with the public prosecution, Royal Oman Police. We are also contacting with a court, high court, because also we have a woman who wanted to marry and their parents, they are disagree. So this in Oman, in our rules in Oman, they're supposed to apply a case in a high court. So all of them, they will be in my shelter until the time of the court day, because they can't go home again. So this shelter is opening for all those serious cases. They can stay with us until they finish their problem. And also we are receiving all nationalities, not an Omani, for all nationalities from different countries, and the government is supporting all the everything that we need, staff, things, food. We are coordinating with the ministry, or the government is paying for all. For our support is 100% from the government, not from NGOs. but and also we have a hotline for children. And also here, social worker is they are in the call. We have a hotline 1100. This is a free number. Call anyone who to see any abuse in school or on hospitals or in road or with neighbor, any abuse for any woman or any children, they can call this number, and this number is 24/7 is working. And also sometimes we are coordinating with NGOs to make different uh, programs for the beneficiaries who are staying with us. And also we are contacting with the schools to let the children who are in our shelter to study, to complete their study. And we have different cooperate with different ministries and different NGOs associations. And now we are completing 9 years in this shelter. And also as a social worker in Oman, we have a social welfare department in our Ministry of Social Development. And the social worker work in this department. For example, we are helping widows, divorced women, family prisoners, and we are working with the elders, with youth. Also, we are working with family of the immigrators family. They need any help, any support, any salary, any services. Our ministry and our government is providing all this. And also we are coordinating with the Ministry of Housing to provide rented houses, or sometime any service they need from that ministry. We are helping those cases to help them what's with their problems. So in different ministries and different company in Oman, we have social worker. They are working in those different sectors. And also we have a center, childhood care center. This center is especially for orphans. They can live there since they are young until they reach 14, their age of 14 years for boys, and after 14 years we transferring them to a different center for the age from 14 above. They'd have different center. 14 years unless they are living in this center, childhood center, and this center, and it has ladies and children. They are living together. There is social worker, and also the staff there working 24/7, and they provide all the services, education, health, everything those children, orphans need. The ministry also provide, and also they are coordinating with NGOs, and also they're providing for those cases. We provide some when they finish their secondary school. We provide for them high school. We provide for them scholarships, and we provide for them jobs or work if they need. Whatever they need, also we are the ministry and all the sector coordinating together to hold those cases. This is about in Oman in general. If you have any question, I will be glad happy to answer.
Thank you so much, Sophia. It sounds really interesting. You probably will get other questions from the delegates, which we will share with you later. So your work has been very much about children and family, children and women abuse towards
Abuse, yes.
yeah. And you are the head of a hostel or
I
a
am the head
centre.
of the hostel, yes.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm the head of the hostel, yes.
Okay. And also human trafficking, it's a 24/7 service, and there's a helpline. So it's very much centered on, I suppose, providing a place of safety for children, for women, for migrants. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. Okay. And it's 100% government funded, but
Yes,
you
funded in our shelter. Yes.
do work with NGOs.
Yes, I do. Sometimes we coordinate with them for activities. Sometimes
Yeah.
they are coordinating with me. Yes.
Yeah. So you meet their needs not just in terms of shelter, you help place children back in education again.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I suppose for those who are here today as well, the something was very interesting in what you said about for women who are involved in high court
Mhm. Yes.
cases, you
Yes.
support and walk alongside them until that case is finished.
Finished. Yes. Yes.
Very good, very good.
We try to
So
solve the problem before the case. Before the day of court, we try to, as possible as we can, to talk to the with the family, with parents, to let them be agree before the court, because every Sunday we have to go to the court. For example, 3 weeks, or every Sunday we will the, it will be the one day for court. So we start as possible as we can before the court is the day of court. We are solving this problem
yeah,
to let them agree and let her to go back home like this.
which as social workers we would obviously support so that they don't
Mhm.
have to go through a difficult court case.
Yeah. Yes. Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes.
The work that you're doing sounds really, really amazing, Sophia.
Thank you a lot. Thank you.
Yeah, it
I love
does.
little bit serious job, but I like it. I
Yeah.
like the social worker. I like, and it's helped me a lot for in my life skills with contacting with others. It's helping with my family, with dealing with people. It's helped me a lot. This job. It's add
Yeah.
me skills. I know a lot of people. I live different levels and abroad also, not Omani, different nationalities. And also in our shelter we have ladies speak in different languages: English, Arabic. One talk French, one Urdu, one Swahili. So if we have any problem with languages, we have different stuff to speak the different languages. So sometimes we are taking another people to translate for those cases, beneficiaries.
That's I mean, yes, that's a perfect example of meeting the needs of the people you work
Yeah,
with, isn't it?
yeah,
Getting, yeah. And what
yeah.
I
And
love,
sometimes we are working with embassies. We are working with the embassies. They
embassies.
can
Yeah.
come our shop. Yes, they are coming to our place to see their beneficiaries if they need something, if they want to to whatever they need. Anytime the embassies can contact with us, and anytime they can visit their the cases of their country. Anytime, even they are women abuse or children, they can. We make everything just to let them join our shelter and to sit with the beneficiaries, and what any need they want, anything we can help them, we provide.
And I think that offers another layer of protection when
Yeah,
embassies are involved also.
yeah, yes,
Hmm. That's right. Thank you for that. I just want to say as well, the most lovely thing you said there was that you love social work, but also how it's enhanced your life.
yes, enhance too much in my
Mm.
family, in my skills, relation. It's helped, and also the staff. Even they are not a social worker in our job, in our ministry, or in the service, or even the staff, if they are even if they are not social worker, this job is enhancing our lives and our personality also.
Mm, that's lovely. Okay, Sophia, well, thank you very much. I imagine you will get some questions later on and reflections, but I'm just for the moment, I'm going to let you take a breath. Okay?
Okay, okay,
Okay. All right.
okay. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. And now, thank you, Sophia. Now I'm going to move on to Ashraf. Ashraf, if you would like to just introduce yourself to everyone and tell us a little bit about social work in Jordan.
Hi all, this is Ashraf from Jordan. I graduated from college. I have bachelor degree and master degree in social work, and I'm president of the Jordan Association of Social Work in Jordan. So I have around 8 years experience in a social work field in different in national and international organizations such as Humanity and Inclusion, King Hussein Cancer Center, Center Victim for Torture, and MEDER. So today I will talk in a brief an overview about social work in Jordan. Please, next slide. The development of social work in Jordan has passed through several stages in the past 100 years. It was reformed in an informal form provided by the tribal system, charities, and some religious organizations. Then, as a result, growing community need, it has become more organized and a field of study in 1965. Next slide. A brief history of social work in Jordan. In the last 2 decades, in response to the unstable surrounding and regional social, political, and economic situations such as refugees crisis, the need for an improved social work services critically increased. Next slide. Jordan and refugees. Jordan was one of the refugees welcoming countries that received refugees from 57 different nationalities, which brought attention to the development of the field of social work. Next slide. Targeted group. The field of social work in Jordan is serving different communities categories: Jordanians and refugees, children, young people, persons with disability, disadvantaged adults, and people who are suffering trauma, behavioral issues, and mental health difficulties. Next slide. Services. Providing services is 3 main areas as following: fulfilling basic needs, shelter, food, water, health, etc. Providing protection services, abuse cases, domestic violence, child protection, and mental health support. Next slide. Syria Crisis. Jordan is one of the countries most affected by the Syrian crisis, hosting the second highest share of refugees per capita in the world. In September 2020, the statistics showed that around 750,000 refugees are currently residing in Jordan, which consist of 8% of Jordan's population. Next slide. Population of refugees: 57 refugee nationalities, 83% living in urban areas, 16 of refugees live in 3 camps: Za'atari, Azraq, Emirati, Jordanian camp. Next slide. Syrian crisis. As a result of that, more local and international organizations provide social services were established. Also, more individuals started working in the social work field, which enriched the local social work capacity by exchanging experience on the local level, and experts received from international humanitarian aid workers, and expertise. Next slide. Challenges. This has created a greater potential to develop this field and improve the quality of services provided, but having a sudden increase in the need for social work services in Jordan have created the following challenges. A big portion of professionals who works as social workers hold degree in different specialties. Lack of laws and policies that organize and monitor the work of social work. No license or regulations required. Lack resources and funding forced many organizations to plan short-term projects or to not have continuous intervention that sustain measured and continuous impact. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ashraf. That is really interesting. Really, really interesting. Ashraf, for example, can you give us just very quickly what you would do in one day as a social worker? What would you do? What would your work look like?
Essential things for day of work. Maybe it's doing home visit, phone call, and maybe morning meeting with your colleagues. Maybe discuss if there is any upcoming activity, like maybe raising awareness session. If there is any coordination meeting with our stakeholders or our maybe partner in the field. Maybe if there is any news about some new laws or some changing in the maybe lockdown or any thing habit about maybe if there is any accident or anything, maybe will be benefit for our beneficiary to know. So it's maybe about sharing information and contact with your colleague and another organization, and maybe it's about maybe raising awareness. Yes.
I mean, the amount of Syrian refugees that you're looking after, that is a huge figure, and I suppose we need to recognise the work that you have been doing in Jordan. The other thing, again, these may come in as questions, Ashraf, but it seems that social work is a relatively new sort of, and now when I say new, I'm talking about 50 years more, but relatively new profession. And when you say that, that the laws and the policies do not, aren't licensed, what does that mean? Can I ask you about that?
Yeah. Actually, there is no license for social work, so anyone can, from any specialist, to be social work if he apply for a job. It's not required to have a social work degree.
Right. Okay. So there's no regulation, no requirement to be a social work qualified social worker to be a social worker.
Yes.
Gosh, that's really interesting. Okay. I mean, the other thing is your work seems to be focused mostly on children and families and children with disability and mental health. I'm just, wondering about older people's services. Do you know, is that involved in your work as well?
Actually, the approach of most of the organization in Jordan, it's a holistic approach to response to all the family needs. Not most of the organizations, they didn't have like a target group, but in general they focus in families. There is some organization in Jordan like HelpAge, they are focusing and provide services for elderly. but for and there is some specialized organization for different type of group. But in general, most of the organization it's like crisis intervention. They try to respond to the whole family.
And when you say crisis intervention, because what I saw in the challenges for you is that most approaches are short term. There's no or little to no sustainability. It's not evaluated. So how does that make you feel as a social worker working within those constraints?
It's a little bit frustrated for us to work in a short-term projects because all the time we hear from the beneficiaries and the families they want this project to continue to provide service to provide actually not only the beneficiary faced that beneficiaries also the social workers in the field they not, maybe sometimes they feel they are not happy to work as social worker because there is no sustainability for their jobs, so that maybe will not encourage them to develop themselves or work in this field. So it's a little bit, but there is today there is many organizations they try to have development projects in Jordan and build capacity for national and government institutions. So there is like opinion from this organization to work more in development projects, but still there is many organizations they just working as a crisis intervention.
Okay. Ashraf, thank you very much. I'm going to allow you to take a breath and hopefully we will get back to you. I'm sure there are many questions. And I'm going to then move on to Mara Chris. Hello, Mara Chris. Would you like to just introduce yourself and tell us a little about your work? Thank you. Oh, can't hear you, Mara Chris. No, not hearing you. No, sorry. Don't worry, Marcus. Everyone understands the joys of doing things online. Take your time. Okay. Yep. No. We'll do see if we can help you with this. Your mic is showing as on, Marcus. Maybe. Oh, hold on. Let's see. Yeah, Marcus. If you. Oh, is that you now? If you click the audio drop down.
Can you hear me now?
Yes. Yes. Hello.
Yes. Yeah. Is it clear?
Perfect.
Okay. So good morning, everyone. To all the Filipinos watching this around the world, magandang gabi po sa inyong lahat. Let me first congratulate the British Association of Social Workers, Northern Ireland, for organizing this international webinar as part of the series of events to celebrate the Social Work Month. And thank you very much for inviting me to be part of this event. I am Marie Chris, a registered social worker from the Philippines. I work with the Juvenile Justice and Welfare Council as Deputy Executive Director, where I provide a critical lens in linking social welfare and justice systems, policy formulation, capacity development, and systems building. Next slide, please. Very briefly, JJWC is a government agency mandated to oversee the implementation of the Juvenile Justice and Welfare Act. This involves actions to improve the lives of children in conflict with the law. In 2018, together with the Supreme Court of the Philippines and UNICEF, we developed an outcome-based education training on juvenile justice for multidisciplinary teams that involve judges, lawyers, police officers, and social workers. And we were privileged to have Martina, who very graciously shared with us Northern Ireland and her organization's experience and expertise in restorative justice. So in the next 10 minutes, I will be giving you a glimpse of social work in the Philippines, the development of the profession, qualifications, areas of practice and governance, and the role of the profession in the country. Next slide, please. One cannot understand social work in the Philippines without seeing it in the context of its colonial and political history, much of which has been shaped by foreign governments and international NGOs since independence. The austerity of the Spanish colonial government and the omnipotence of the clergy created a model of social welfare that was dominated by the religious orders with minimal government involvement. Social work is seen to have developed as a profession during the period following independence, initially by way of the influence of aid workers from the United States, and then through a small number of Filipino social workers trained in the US who established the Philippine Association of Social Workers. Next slide, please. The history of the Philippines and of its social welfare system has had a profound impact on what social work is and does in the country. Let me just share some of the turning points in the history of the profession. Prior to the 1940s, there was a transition of social welfare in the country prompted by American influence, both in terms of a growing attention to professionalization and an increasing emphasis on the need for coordination. In 1946, the Philippines was proclaimed a republic and state engagement with welfare grew. The year 1947 saw a social welfare commission being situated under the office of the president, which signified the formal recognition of social welfare as a responsibility by the state. The Philippine Association of Social Workers was formed by that same handful of overseas trained workers in 1947. Social workers in the 1950s and 1960s were engaged in casework, mostly working in hospitals and mental health settings, assessing eligibility for free treatment and financial support. A key development for the social work profession came in 1965 when Republic Act 4373 introduced regulation of social work and of the operation of social work agencies. In 1976, existing government welfare agencies evolved into the Department of Social Services and Development, shifting emphasis from the traditional, often institution-based social welfare to community-oriented programs and services which underscored people's own capacities for problem solving. The drive towards development, coupled with very limited resources and reliance on overseas aid, has underpinned an emphasis on community-based social work since the 1970s. From the 1990s onwards, social work in the Philippines continues to operate within a pluralist structure of local government units, non-governmental organizations, faith-based charitable providers, and some private sector agencies, such as private hospitals and industrial social work settings. All of this activity is to varying degrees subject to the oversight and vision of the Philippine Department of Social Welfare and Development. Next slide, please. The Philippine Association of Social Workers Incorporated, established in 1947 and incorporated in 1948, played a central role in the passage of the law that regulated the profession and subsequent legislation which created the Department of Social Welfare. The association, a member of IFSW, organizes through its national and regional chapters continuing professional education, assists distressed vulnerable groups, and links and connects social workers with government agencies. PASWI also actively lobbies for enactment of laws that will benefit the social service workforce. It is equally important to note that the National Association for Social Work Education Incorporated, or NASWE, has been in existence and active since 1965. So NASWE operates as the national umbrella organization of schools of social work in the Philippines. Next slide, please. Since the 1960s, the Philippines saw ongoing efforts to set and monitor standards in social work education. So social work qualifying programs in the Philippines are typically 4 years in duration. Admission requirements for social work training include the gathering of satisfactory references, health checks, evidence of appropriate qualifications, and the passing of a college entrance examination. The curriculum emphasizes the integrative character of social work within the context of a micro to macro practice continuum. It incorporates 1,000 hours of supervised field experience, typically in community, government, and private institutions. So a graduate of social work qualifying course must pass the board examination for social workers in order to practice as a registered social worker in the Philippines. The examination is supervised by the Professional Regulation Commission. A national curriculum has been in place for social work in the Philippines since the late 1960s, with the most recent version approved by the government's Commission on Higher Education in 2017. So these policies and guidelines set out clear competency expectations, which include skills in the helping process, knowledge of social policy, applied psychology and sociology, and the ability to reflect critically and to make appropriate use of supervision. There is therefore considerable rigor in terms of expected standards of social work education across the country. Next slide, please. Areas of social work practice in the Philippines include child welfare and family support, work with older people, women, disabled people, and those with mental health problems, disaster management, community development and sustainability, community organizing, and advocacy and social action. So the roles and tasks undertaken range from direct practice with individuals, families, groups, and communities to positions which focus upon social administration, project development, training, and the management of programs. So these areas of practice takes place in settings which include the private companies, military contexts, private and public hospitals, ports, statutory and non-statutory welfare institutions, schools, and church-based services. Practice also will sometimes focus upon particular groups within the population, such as street children, farmers, the urban poor, or migrant workers. However, it is equally likely to take the form of generic practice, tackling issues as they arise within a local area. A significant dimension of social work in the Philippines is that many qualified and registered social workers are in posts with titles which do not mention social work. Next slide. During the pandemic, here are some of the roles of the social workers as frontline staff. So social workers provided promotive, preventative, and treatment services during the pandemic. We were at the helm of the implementation of social amelioration programs that benefited around 18 million households nationwide. Social workers also provided support to repatriated Filipinos, numbers of which reached 360,000 from various countries and international conveyances. Several groups and networks of social workers also offered online psychosocial services. Social workers in agencies involved in policy formulation, such as in JJWC, we developed policies which were later issued as memorandum circulars and guidance notes that served as guide of local government units in managing cases, for instance, of children deprived of liberty or in institutions during the pandemic. So true to the integrative nature of the social work profession in the Philippines, social workers served as advocates for better social services in various platforms. In closing, let me just say that social work is an established and comparatively well-developed profession in the Philippines. And while there are still tensions within the profession among public perception and professional prestige, specialist and generic practice, and between individualized and community-oriented approaches, the profession plays and will continue to play a central role in achieving social justice, human rights, and inclusive development. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mara Chris. That was really, really interesting. Well, I know it's interesting because I've been with you. What I what I got from when I met with you and your colleagues, Mara Chris, you have a very strong sense of social justice. You know, that speaks to you when you go to the Philippines and watch social workers in action. You know, you cover, as you said yourself, social work seems to be very well established. Well, it is well established in the Philippines. But you also at the end there, interestingly, and I think this might resonate with other delegates and you know, participants, about the tension was in terms of professional prestige. Okay, and how we as a profession are viewed by others with whom we work. Can you expand on that just a little?
Well, still, when you say social work in the Philippines, they usually think of giving services only, like free services. So if someone needs medical assistance, they go to a social worker. You know, uh, very not developmental in nature, and I think that's an important characteristic of social work and how it is viewed in the Philippines. When I say prestige, it means comparatively with other development workers, social workers are still not at par when viewed with the other service in the frontline development workers in the Philippines.
And yet what is absolutely stunning is the amount of work that a person has to go through to acquire a social work, you know, qualification, you know, to be qualified as a professional social worker. You know, it's quite stunning that you have to do, you know, 1,000 supervised field sort of examination, is that right? So, you know, your social work course or degree seems to be really intense. You know, so
Mhm.
you're extremely professional, yet you're not, there's a
Yeah.
lack of parity with other professionals.
Mhm.
Is what you know, I'm seeing. And also you're very well regulated as well, Mara Chris, as a profession.
Yes, well, we have the Philippine, the Professional Regulation Commission, and most of the um, organizations in the Philippines require a registered social worker. So, for instance, case study reports have to bear the license number of the social worker. So the court, and these are being used by the courts when the case, of course, reach the courts, and the judges usually look for the social workers who prepare the case study reports of the children and for instance.
Yeah. Okay, brilliant. Okay, Mara Chris, well, thank you very much. Thank you very, very much for that. Carolyn, I'm going to the panelists, I'm going to pass you over to Carolyn now because I'm sure Carolyn has lots of comments and questions for you. Is that okay, Carolyn?
Absolutely, Martina. There are lots of questions have come through on the system. So, I mean, I'll add my thanks to Martina's. I mean, a fascinating presentation, giving us a real flavour, I think, of social work in each of your respective countries. I'm just going to start with this question that's come in. So it says, is supervision normal in your country for social workers? And if so, who pays for it? And Maggie, maybe I'll start with you and then we'll work our way through the panel.
Social work supervision is a requirement for professional registration, and it is generally paid for by the employer, but sometimes not. And the debates are around whether it's somebody outside of your organisation, so it's not just your line manager with a power over you, or whether it's some outside professional who can give you guidance. And some organisations do both, some do one or the other. But yeah, it's a standard part of the process for a social worker.
Okay, thanks, Maggie. Ashraf, do you have anything to add there? Is supervision normal within your country?
Actually, yes, supervision is come from the same organization. Maybe your line manager or senior social work or something like that. Yeah.
Great, thanks. Mara, Chris?
Yes, it's basically the same with Ashraf and Maggie. Yeah.
Great, thank you. And Sophia, I'm not sure if you're still on the line, are you? Hello, are you there? I'm not sure. Oh, hello? No, we'll maybe come back. Sophia may well come back to us if she's able to. The next question comes through and it's in relation.
I am here,
Hello.
Safia.
Hi.
Safia with you.
Sophia, did you hear my question, Sophia? It
Could
was
you
in
please
relation
repeat
to
it?
supervision. Is it normal in your country?
Yes. It's
Great.
yeah.
And that's provided through through work?
Government. Yes.
Great. That's great.
Yeah.
Okay. The next question that has come through is the pandemic has illustrated social and health inequalities, especially for migrants and refugees. This may have impacted on people's mental health and well-being. Does the panel have any thoughts on how social workers can work together around the world to support groups and communities for whom this might apply? And Ashraf, I'm wondering if you would maybe kick off with that. I mean, I'm thinking of the work that you do in Jordan in relation to refugees.
Regarding that, there is many projects working before pandemic, working with refugees, but based on the situation of with the pandemic, most of them, all of them, changed their method of implementation for their projects. So they are for raising awareness. They use uh, the technology like platforms, and they try to do virtual home visits for the people. UNHCR in Jordan, they close their offices, so they discuss with the government. If there is any documents or something like that, they will not consider them are illegal or something like that. So there is many procedure are taken, and many activities is changed based on the situation of the pandemic.
Yeah. Thanks, Ashraf. I mean, Maggie, do you want to come in there?
Refugees and migrants, not my specialist area, but I can just talk to you a little bit about some of the COVID response in New Zealand, which had a really broad sweep from the government addressing vulnerabilities. Like all our homeless people were housed in things like motels and hotels because no travellers were coming. So there was a really distinct piece of work done around vulnerable people. So refugees and migrants would have been mopped up in that particular piece of work. But we worked collaboratively across all the different sectors, but in particular, we worked collaboratively with the government, where they were very keen to hear from the grassroots what was happening on the ground and what the problems were. So I recall I was on some working groups around the family violence and sexual violence area, and we were talking to the ministers responsible for welfare in our country and other ministers too, Minister of Police, and they were just constantly asking what's happening on the ground, what do we need to do, what changes do we need to make. So that collaborative approach isn't just with your other social work partners, it was also with government. And we do that about quite a few problems. We make a point of getting to know all the ministers that are involved so that they can hear from the ground what's needed.
Yeah, thanks, Maggie. Mara, Chris, do you have anything to add to that question?
Yes, I think this is where the Association of Social Workers can come in. We have the International Federation of Social Workers, and there I think very strong networks of social workers around the world. So if there are initiatives on mental health and well-being, I think this is a project that these groups can work on. Data, for instance, is very important, so information sharing, practice, sharing of good practices or knowledge management is another area that can be looked into by the International Federation or other professional groups. So yeah, that's it.
Thank you. And Sophia, are you there? Are you able to hear the question?
Yes, I'm here.
Did you hear the question, Sophia? It was about health and social inequalities and the fact that the pandemic has worsened those and have an impact on people's mental health. And do you have any thoughts on how we might work together to support groups and communities?
I didn't understand the question. What do you mean exactly?
The question, Sophia, is about health and social inequalities, especially for migrants and refugees. So the question is saying that it may have impacted on people's mental health and well-being. And do you have any thoughts on how we as a community of social workers need to work together to try and make things better?
Yes, we need to get we need to cooperate together to help these cases during any crisis. We need to be cooperated to solve those immigrators and those cases.
Absolutely. Okay, thank you, Sophia. The other question that has come through is, and it might be one for you, Maggie, what services does your country offer victims of sexual violence? So we'll start with you, Maggie, will we? And then we'll move on.
Okay, so the services for those people who experience sexual violence are insufficient because it's such a specialist area. So there's always waiting time for people to get help, but there is help. We have a peculiar system with an insurance scheme run by the government whereby counselling for victims is available and free and paid for, but there's often a waiting time involved in that. There are crisis response, so 24/7 phone lines and call out services. There's collaboration between the police and the medical services and the specialist NGO that will be working with the victims. So they have arrangements between those three parties all the time about how they'll support. And then there's support for victims going to court and for the journey for them. And in New Zealand, I guess, again, thinking about that systemic approach, there will also be support for our work with children, we support the families too, because sexual abuse trauma doesn't just affect the person directly, it affects their family and their setting as well. So things are thought about in that systemic way. There's restorative justice processes in place as well, and there's the criminal court processes. So there's a variety of options there. I forgot to mention earlier, sorry, it's slightly tangential, but in New Zealand, there are a lot of Indigenous services across the board, and they will have Indigenous services for sexual violence too. And for many Indigenous people, that's what they're looking for, is services that reflect their worldviews and the way in which they want to do their healing and recovery. So there's not enough of those, but there are some.
That's great. Thanks, Maggie. Mara, Chris, do you want to come in there?
Yes. Well, aside from the programs and services that Maggie mentioned, which is also present in the Philippines. We also run facilities for these victims of sexual violence. We also offer programs for the families. I think one of the strategies in the Philippines in fighting violence against children is strengthening local structures for the protection of children. So we are on the prevention, the programs that are provided to the sexual violence victims. When we have those, we also have programs on the prevention side. So we are strengthening the barangay, which is the smallest unit in the society in the Philippines, so that programs will be able to be implemented at the community level to prevent violence against children, sexual violence included.
Thank you, Mara, Chris. Thank you. Ashraf?
Yes, there is Family Department of Protection in Jordan. They are responsible to, they are under police, and they are responsible for any kind of sexual issue. So, and there is many organization in Jordan, they national and international organization and governmental, they provide psychosocial for those cases.
That's great, thanks.
Mhm.
Sophia, can you hear me?
Yes, here in Oman, we are working with the cases of sexual abuse. We are coordinating with police, with public prosecutor. We are protecting the children who are suffering of who are who have this suffering from sexual abuse. We are keeping them in our shelter until we finish the medical check for these cases. Coordinate with public prosecutor to catch the person who makes that problem. So, and under the regulation, we have different regulation in different cases for sexual abuse. Uh, we have different regulation to take care of this issue, but we are coordinating with the ROP, Royal Oman Police, and public prosecution. And for to prevent the children, we are keeping them in our shelter until this problem is finished.
That's great. So that sounds like quite a collaborative approach. There's a real relationship between you and the police force in trying to connect and keep a family safe. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah, that's very good. Okay. Well, hopefully that answers that question.
Carolyn,
And
I understand that we have time for one more question.
okay. Well then, will I make it a good one?
Yeah.
What would entice a social worker to practice in your country? Seems a
Perfect.
good Finnish one. Maggie, what would entice a social worker to go to New Zealand, apart from all the gorgeous views and scenery and wine? I mean, apart from that, what would entice someone to go to New Zealand?
Goodness only knows. I must say I've had lots of job applications from people all around the world because they seem to have decided that our Prime Minister is quite a safe pair of hands. But of course, no one internationally can enter our borders. So I've had to say no to everybody. So I think people mostly come to New Zealand for the lifestyle and a perceived sense of safety. I think that's the main attractions for them, really. But I don't know. We have a lot of international social workers, so that's great.
Sorry, I dropped my laptop.
Well done.
Mara, Chris, I'm going to pose the same question to you. Although again, I'm guessing there's lots of things about the lifestyle that would be particularly nice about living in the Philippines. But what would encourage someone to come and practice social work there?
What temperature? I think the diversity of the experience. Um, we have a very rich culture and the practice is varied. Um, what I think is very essential in our practice and social work practice in the Philippines is that it is integrative. So while you, for instance, practice casework, it is not um, uh, when you do casework, it is also expected, for instance, for you to work with the communities because the link of the micro and the macro practice is very evident in the Philippines. So I think that would entice a social worker to work because you can go through the different levels of practice in the Philippines. Our social work education also for instance, there are master of courses, there are continuing professional education in the Philippines that would also help and enhance the competencies while working. So I think those are some of the reasons why I think at this point there are still students and young people who would choose to be a social worker in the Philippines.
Great, that's lovely. Thanks, Mara, Chris. Ashraf, what would encourage us to come to Jordan? What could we come and do in Jordan?
Yeah, there is a good weather in my country. It's warm, um, and I think people here they are welcoming from for any strange people, and they are nice with strange people. And we can notice that with how they deal with the refugees crisis. Also, if we talking about the social work field in my country, there is 100 of organizations. They are working to serve the refugees and vulnerable Jordanian. So I think you will have, as I got from the field, there is different background. There is many people working in humanitarian work in Jordan from different countries, and they have different experience. So I think it's a good opportunity to exchange your experience and learn many things from their experience.
Great, Ashraf. Thank you.
Welcome.
Sophia?
Yes, hi. I am encouraging you to come to Oman to first the Oman. Nowadays the weather is very good, 20, 22, 25. But in summer it is very hot. So if you come, you are welcome from September, October until March, but not
Okay.
in April. April it is
Okay.
very we have hot. And also here the people in Oman very kind. They have a good relationship with foreigners. And also we have too much services, lots of services about social services in ministry and companies, NGOs also, because the NGOs in Oman, they are under the supervision of Ministry of Social Development. So it will be very good opportunity to exchange our experience and you also share your experience in Oman. But there is a lot of services in social parts you can know about it more and more.
That's great, Sophia.
Okay.
Thank you. And I just want to say thank you to everyone. Thank you to Mara, Chris, to Ashraf, to Sophia, and to Maggie. And I'm going to say a special shout out to Maggie, who has stayed up. What time is it, Maggie, with you?
It's 12:30 and I'm getting a bit dopey. So it's
12:30. She had her biggest time difference. So a special thanks. But we really, really enjoyed conversation. Martina.
Yeah, I just wanted to say something very quickly. I mean, from everything we've heard today, and what we've heard from you all is a snapshot of social work across across the globe. What I have heard is a very, very strong sense of professional identity and a recognition that through collaboration, cooperation, and a desire to improve the life and circumstances of beneficiaries and social services users, we can do this, whether it's a crisis situation or just generally. Again, just very quickly, what's jumping out at me are we all have solid social work values, and our focus is very much on the need of those who most need our services, and the justice. There's a lot of social justice coming through from everything that everyone has said, and it's justice for those who've experienced inequality in every context from cradle to grave. So I love hearing that. And finally, I just feel a really strong sense of connectivity. You know, despite how far apart we are in time and in place, you know, we're very together and we're very connected. And it's been an honour for me, and I know Karen probably said the same, to be shared this panel with you. So I've just a very big thank you from me, and I'm sure from all delegates, to Maggie, Mara, Chris, Ashraf and Sophia for just giving us such a rich webinar today. Thank you so much, and for your wisdom. So Gurmila my agaf, and I think we will probably be shutting down very quickly, folks. So I'll just check, is that correct?
Yep,
Yes,
we'll just
yeah,
close.
that's correct. Okay, so thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you a lot.
Thank
Thank
you
you
so
for your
much.
opportunity. Thank you.
Bye.
Welcome
Bye.
to Oman. Welcome.
It's warm
Okay,
in
thank you.
Oman, and it's warm in everywhere but the UK, so we may just be going there.
We may be.
Welcome.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
everyone.
you.
I really
Thank you a
enjoyed
lot.
all your stories. That was great.
Thank you.